Okay, everybody, welcome back to long-form content on this channel. If you don't know, I'm Holderhek. Every once in a while, I decide to teach other people how to play video games. 5 years ago, I taught half the world how to play Enhancement Shaman in World of Warcraft. Now I just spent 300 hours playing Darkest Dungeon 2, and I'm going to teach you how to play the Kingdoms mode on that. So, you might be asking yourself, why should we listen to you, World of Warcraft man? And the answer is, I just beat Kingdoms mode on Blood Moon, which is the hardest difficulty. I'm pretty sure I'm the second person in the world to have done it. Now, I don't have confirmation on this. I'm not gonna say it's verifiably true, but I'm gonna go ahead and say that I'm probably in at least the top 5, like for sure. I know literally one person that has beat this mode in this difficulty. And that's it. Anyway, since I feel like I know what I'm talking about, I'm going to be able to walk you through all the things that I did to beat Kingdoms mode, and all the things that I think you should do. There's not that many, and it's going to make the experience a lot easier. Cool? Okay, let's get started on the overview of what this even is. You're just going to hit new game. We're going to hit Hunger of the Beast Clan. That's the only one that exists. Name your save file whatever you want. This is going to give you the lore. And we're going to pick Last Stand. Now, these maps are kind of important. You can see Convergence is kind of easier. Ridgeline's kind of more spread out. But the main thing is the gold diamonds are your inns, and the outlined gold diamonds are the inns with underground access. Now, I prioritized these 4 over all the other ones, but the way your game plays out, it could be a little bit different. You could prioritize this one. These 3, you're going to want to basically pick a couple of inns to specialize in things, and we're going to talk about what that means a little bit later, but for sake of optimization, the underground inns are the most important because you can go from one to the other in one single zone instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, the entire map, right? So these are the most important, but they might not end up being the most important for you. Then we pick Blood Moon. Obviously, it means everything sucks all the time. Hit continue. Then you're going to pick your characters. Now, when you pick your 4 characters here, you got to understand that the way this game mode works is you get a large bunch of characters to play the game mode with, but not everybody. And it's random, and the abilities they give you is basically random. It's not their starter kit. It's not abilities that you might enjoy with those characters. And they all start off as Wanderer, and you can't change it. If you don't know what that means, I can't explain everything about this game, but I'll explain everything in a way that makes sense for people who at the very least have baseline concepts of this game. Anyway, they start off as Wanderer. You're going to want to change that sooner rather than later. Anyway, I'm going to go with my default starting crew, which is going to be Man-at-Arms and Duelist and Plague Doctor in the back doing Plague Doctor things and Occultist. Now we got our back line caster support, our front line tank and DPSer, and this is the crew that I like to run with now. There's obvious other teams. You can just pick whatever team you want to start with, but you will be guaranteed to have these 4. Everybody else, you don't know until you get in the game. So we're going to embark. Now you're going to go through a very brief little tutorial zone, and as you're going through this tutorial zone, you're going to notice that it looks a lot like the Confession tutorial zone, except it's not. So right here, at this first encounter, you're going to get a chance to get either stagecoach items or a trinket. Now, stagecoach items need to be prioritized over basically anything else, except for one point in the game where you're doing a quest where you can't have any stagecoach items. They're super important. You need these more than anything else. You can get trinkets, so always pick stagecoach items. It might not be good, but it's probably better than some trinket, right? So what did we get? So this is amazing. This is actually amazing. This, if you get something like this, or you get the other thing that cooks soup, this is probably the best item you could ever possibly get. Equip this to your stagecoach, because then you don't have to buy food. The main thing in this mode, you are destitute. You have basically no money for half of the game. So not having to buy food and always having food for all your characters, even when you swap them out, is super paramount. So this is a perfect example of why you pick the stagecoach item. Now you're going to encounter your first beastmen. These axe guys are actually a huge problem. You're gonna have a bunch of different types of beastmen to deal with. I strongly recommend you prioritize these axe guys, especially if they're in the back row. When they're in the front row like this, they're not too big of a problem. But if you see these two back here, they can do an ability that double hits your back row for like 20 damage. You need to absolutely annihilate them as soon as possible. And now, coming up on the inn, that's actually the most important part. And that's what we're going to touch on right now after we save it. Because as you can see, it is currently on fire. This is going to be the first time we have to defend an inn. So this is going to show you the different character types. So you got this guy in the front. He causes a lot of blight damage and a lot of stress damage. As mentioned before, he deals a ton of physical damage. And this guy is your typical shaman in the back row, debuffing, causing blight, causing them to be stronger. However, he's not actually that big of a threat. Like, yeah, he makes them stronger, and yeah, he can make them do some stuff. But this guy can stack blight like crazy, can stack stress like crazy. And again, if he was back here, he'd be a much bigger threat. So this guy's not actually that big of a deal for you. But anyway, let's just get started on dealing with these dudes and getting them off the map so we can talk about inns. So this is an important mechanic. You'll see that their berserk ability stacks, and then every couple of turns, they're going to be completely immune to damage and with a 20% debuff resistance. At this point, you can still stun them, you can still dot them, but they will take 0 damage. They basically can't die this turn. What I was typically doing in my gameplay is when this happened, if one of these guys, and when they're in this state, that's when they can kind of cast like a really big attack. So imagine it like the worship tokens in the base game. When they're like this, if you can stun them or daze them, it's pretty beneficial. But otherwise, just realize you're not going to be able to hurt them, and they're about to do something that's going to hurt a lot. So bare minimum, try to like prepare for it. Like healing for 6, very useful. Thank you, Occultist, as always. Okay, and now we go to the inn. You're going to see something very important. This is your first quest item. This quest item, when equipped, it's going to tell you everything that you need to do. I'm not going to spoil all the quests for you because they're incredibly like basic to understand. I will link in the description of the video a Reddit post that goes over the exact things you're supposed to do for the quests. There is one quest towards the end where something is worded in a way that is somewhat confusing. And I will say this, all you need to know about that quest is if something says must be above escalation 2, what that actually means is it must be above escalation 3. You'll know what I'm talking about when you get there. When you're driving around for 10 to 20 days with literally nothing to do, and you're like, what am I doing? Why can't I complete this quest? It is because there is a little bit of confusion on the wording. So now what you're going to see is the Kingdoms mode. There's a siege. And at the beginning of the game, every single one of these inns is defenseless, okay? We need to fix that ASAP. But what we're going to do first, since they are defenseless, we have to get over there and save them. Now, we could take our party, take 1 turn to go under here, 2 turns, 3 turns to get there before the 7 is up. And that's fine. You could totally do that. Or you can start moving the people around the map. Bear in mind, you have to have a pretty solid understanding of what all these characters do and what they can do, but their baseline role is super important, right? So you got Bonnie here, the runaway. What does she do? She deals fire damage. She can heal you if you're bleeding, but does she even have that ability right now? She does. Good. So she can deal fire damage and heal you if you're bleeding. So she is just basically DPS. She would be back row. You got Crusader. What abilities does he have? He could be a tank. He's got Bulwark. Okay, he can be a tank, but he doesn't have his heal, and he doesn't have his stress heal. So all he can do right now is tank. And you have to look at these characters and you move them over to where the thing's getting rated. Now, when you click on them, you'll see this. You can move them one region risk-free, 2 regions, they'll get fatigued. Fatigue, another thing we need to talk about. Fatigue is a lowering of your maximum health. And this happens every time you take a turn, which means going from the inn through the sprawl to the camp, through the sprawl to the inn. Every single time you go through one of these zones, you're going to get somewhere between like 5 to 15% fatigue, which is a complete lowering of your max health. And it is the true killer of this mode. You can lower it initially at field hospitals, which is super important. I would save most of your baubles for that until you get some inns up and running, but you have to really avoid the fatigue. So what you do is these characters can move one region without getting fatigued. So you know you need to get a full party that can tank, stress heal, off tank, DPS, apply dots, whatever party you want to create, and they have to get there in 7 turns. You can move them 2 spaces, but they'll get fatigued. We have 7 turns, we can get them there sooner, right? So Runaway's already there. We can have, you know, Leper can go as a main tank. We can have Crusader go as off DPS. We can have Jester. He can go here to camp. That's 1 turn. We can have Leper go here. We can have Crusader go here. But the problem with this team is now there's no healer. Where are the healers? Well, we have Plague Doctor, we have Occultist. The only other healer really on the map is Vestal, who's way down here. So that means this party is going to have to rely on Flaggy. Does he have his heal? Yes. So, you know, it's not the best. It's not super optimal, but since this is only escalation 1, it's doable. So we'll send Flaggy over there. So we'll have a tank, Crusader, we'll have Runaway as DPS, we could have a tank as Leper, and then we'll have a stress healer as Jester. So we have some options, right? We can play around. We got 5 people over here in this area, and that's really all you're doing in the very beginning of the game, is you're sending people to go defend the inns. Now, this is really where the complete overarching strategy of the entire mode comes into play. And it's in the inn upgrades, and it's managing this resource right here, the inn materials. Whenever you do resistance encounters and even in assistance encounters, you can pick the choice that gives you more of these. Your first goal is always to get this down to here. You want the veteran specialization. The veterans can defend these inns by themselves. And honestly, they're so good at defending these inns by themselves, I almost feel like Red Hook might nerf them. Like, it's crazy. You do not need to protect inns at all once you're here. They don't need their trinkets. If you have extra points and you want to give them their trinkets, that's great. But honestly, if you get the inns to down here to the veteran specializations, it's over. You've basically beaten the game. Then you just have to do the quests in the order you get them, and then obviously fight the end boss and do some of the, like, you know, harder combat encounters, and they do get hard. They do definitely get hard. I think on Escalation 3, don't quote me on this because I can't remember right now, but it's like 60% extra health and 60% extra damage on every single creature you fight. I know it's 40 for sure on Escalation 2. Either way, it's not fun. So you have to be able to get the inns to protect themselves. This is literally the entire strategy of this mode. If everybody just did this, I feel like people would have a much, much better shot of, at the very least, getting to like the second to last boss or the last boss to like learn the mechanics to beat it. So we only have 30 inn materials right now. So obviously that doesn't get us very far. That only gets us to Signal Flare, which allows us to like buy the ability to summon people if our party dies. And they will. But let's save these last 2, save this last 10 points here, and just save it for being able to unlock hero skills or master hero skills. So then you would go into your characters and you would look at what abilities they were given. Remember, they're not always going to be the same. And see if you can, you know, do a couple of zones with these abilities and decide, well, like, well, she doesn't have meditation. She doesn't have preparation. That's really not great for our duelist here. So I'm going to make the tactical decision, instead of being able to master hero skills, we're just going to unlock some hero skills and then use our mastery to get bare minimum, like, preparation here. I think is super important for her. And we need to also get bolster for Barristan, so we have a stress heal. And that's all you can do. That's your first 2 mastery points, right? But you will get an insane amount of mastery points. I think by the end of my game, I had like 130 mastery points. So don't worry about that. But I cannot stress this enough. The very first thing you do to every inn, the very first thing you do in this game, you're going to have these raids. See how it made the inn a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger, but you want it to be level 3. Level 2s, they might be able to defend themselves. If you have 1 or 2 heroes there to help, they should be able to defend themselves. But you want to be able to do this quest as fast as possible and boost up these inns as fast as possible. So absolutely 100% of the time, get these things to level 3 to where they can defend themselves. So what I would typically do is I'd start here at the Cask and Casket, and these aren't always going to be the same name, is I'd go from this inn through the Tangle to this inn, then go back to this inn, boost it back up to 3, then go back to this inn, boost it back up to 3, because I'm going to get some of these inn supply points here to boost this one up. I'll probably be able to get it to 2 or 3, maybe. And then go back here and do the exact same thing. So now we have 2 inns at level 3, and I never really have to think about them ever again. Okay, now, let's say we're doing the quests. We've gone through the escalations. We understand the mode now. We have to repel raids. We have to do the quests in our inventory as we get them. We're building the inns up to level 3. Now what do we do with all the inn upgrades? Now, remember what I said earlier about how certain inns are more important than other ones? Because again, you have the underground access. So this inn is connected to this inn through the sluice or the new slime zone, which are admittedly stronger and harder to deal with than the other zones, but you can get there faster. So then what you do is you make an inn a specialization. So every one of these inns, there's provisioning, there's mastery, there's the Wainwright, and there's a physician. My personal preference is to always do the physician first, get an inn up and running with this, because you can heal fatigue. All the way down to heal fatigue after your inns are all level 4. Or if your people are super fatigued and you've just been beat into the ground, you need that. This is almost equally as important. The thing is, with these inn upgrades, you can only have 1 per inn, so it becomes a specialized inn. All of them can be leveled down to barracks. That's fine. But they can only be a provisioning, a mastery, a Wainwright, or a physician. Now, the physician one, again, you can heal fatigue. It gives you more healing items in the shop. It allows you to be healed by the physician for cheaper. You can get rid of diseases, you can get rid of quirks, just like you would at a field hospital. And that's incredibly important in this mode. And then, once you've got the bottom tier unlocked, you can get a capstone item. So you can see like a trauma center. All this way down to the bottom, you spend 40 more points. Now, there's 100% field hospital and Churgeon's table scouting, and you get -1 blight, bleed, and burn received. So if you're going to go into like a boss fight or something, like, it'd be really great to go to this inn first, which is why it'd be better to have this inn near like the underground, because you can always get to it and like use it for that. Go to the Wainwright, you know, here you get the 40% root scouting, enemies gain, you know, weakness and vulnerability. So they all have very, very good bonuses, but also 40 points is a lot to spend. So this is like one of the very last things you're going to do. The Grand Bazaar, though, as you can see, if you unlock this, you get 20 inn materials every time you get there, which is pretty nice. So I know that's like a million things to think about, But let's just nail it down now into the very, very concise and easy to understand. You have X number of days, 44 in the case of Blood Moon, to do all the quests, which some are fetch quests, some are kill quests, some make you use your brain wrinkles, but you have 44 days to do the quests. Some of those quests require escalation 1 or escalation, or I'm sorry, this is escalation 2, I guess, because we're currently in escalation 1. So escalation 1, everything's a little bit easier. Escalation 2, everything kind of sucks, and you only get 8 days of escalation 1. You take more damage, they give more damage, they have more health, there's less safe routes, it ain't good. Escalation 3, when you get to the very, very end, which is like the last 2 or 3 quests, everything sucks a lot. So that's why being able to complete these quests as fast as possible and then have as much time as you need to go from zone to zone to zone to zone, shoring up every one of these inns, getting them all to tier 3, then creating your specialization inns, where you can have one that cures fatigue, one that gives you extra inn supplies, one that allows you to buff your characters. Like the mastery trainer down here, just, you know, if they're sitting there, they get crit. You know, you can upgrade their stats, which is like a whole separate feature in the game. I honestly never really used this, but I can see it being useful if you have the extra points, right? My main focus was getting this all the way down to veteran, and then I had a couple of inns that were specialized here, a couple of inns that were specialized here. I had like 2, honestly. I had like 2 inns where I could cure fatigue, and I never really messed with Rainwright. And I never really messed with Provisioner, but I can really see now, like Grand Bazaar would be super useful if you have the points for it. So decide your playstyle going in, decide what you're going to focus on, and you will be able to defeat the Kingdoms mode, I think, for sure. Barring, you know, RNG and everything else happening that happens in this game all the time, right? It's not going to stop you from being like quadruple crit for 20 3 turns in a row by all 4 creatures and you randomly getting your jester killed or anything like that. But as you can see, you know, you have one workable party. You can make one other fairly workable party, and then you'll have some extras running around. You know, you can get Crusader to be a healer, and hell, you could make Junia a tank. There's ways you can spec people to make this work, but at the beginning of the game, you basically have 3 working parties, and they might not be optimal, and they might not be the best, but you're going to make it work, and then you're going to have those 3 parties stationed at different points on the map, right? And they're going to be able to help repel these sieges, while you, as your main party, switch around and fix up all the inns. Final thing on fatigue. Obviously, if Barristan only has 50% max health, you're going to have to swap him out. So that means you're going to have to take some of the other people on the map and send them to a campsite or send them to an inn where you then intersect and meet with them at that inn to swap who needs to be swapped, and they will then rest every turn, getting a little bit of the fatigue back. Or you can cure their fatigue if you're happening to meet at one of the inns where you can cure fatigue. Now, nothing that happens in this mode is ever going to be optimal. That's why you need to try to put things in places where you're going to be the most, and that's why I say Underground is probably the best if your team can survive going through the Underground. But the Sluice and the Slime Zone, I forget what the name is right now, have been buffed, and they're much, much stronger than any of the other zones above ground. So, that being said, I'm sure I forgot a bunch of stuff. If I did, I'll try to reply in the comments. The best part about me making this video is, now that I beat this game on Blood Moon, I don't really have much else to do with it, so I'll probably be streaming other games. But if you do want to come by, check out the Holderhek at twitch.tv. We're going to be playing a lot of Civilization, a lot of Monster Hunter, Probably some more Warhammer. You know, I'm a variety streamer, man, but I've been so dedicated and obsessed with Darkest Dungeon 2. And then once I beat this on that difficulty, I felt like, okay, enough people in my chat, in my community, and other people that I've just been seeing on Twitch, like, just cannot understand this mode. But bare minimum, if you make every inn on the map tier 3, it's going to be really, really hard for them to fall. Those militia defenders are insane. They're honestly, they don't take stress damage. They have no death blow resistance, but they're honestly better than some of the heroes. It's kind of crazy. Hope this helps. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. If you think I'm wrong, I'm not. Come tell me on my Twitch channel and then leave yourself lurking there for 12 hours or something. Okay, cool. Thanks. Bye. You guys have a good one. I'll see you next time I get crazy obsessed about a video game.